Okay, I want to welcome everyone to our webinar. My name is Linda Smith, and I am the Director of the Early Childhood Initiative at the Bipartisan Policy Center here in Washington, D.C. For those of you who don't know BPC, we are a Washington, D.C. based think tank that tries to take the best ideas from both sides of the aisle to promote policies that help solve America's most pressing problems. And as I routinely say, there's no problem more pressing right now than childcare for American families. Before we start, I want to thank our funder, the Heising Simons Foundation and Barbara Chow, for their support of this work, and also other people here on the BPC staff who worked so hard on this series, really, of webinars that we've been doing. This is the fourth in a four-part series. The other four, part one, we did several months ago. How did we get here? Understanding tribe sovereignty and how it impacts services for Indigenous children. The speakers on that webinar were Senator Byron Dorgan and Dr. Anton Truer. And they talked about the history of tribes and tribal sovereignty and set the stage for how we can improve services for our AIAN children. The second in the series was understanding sovereignty and tribal state collaboration, making them work for American Indian and Alaska Native childcare. The speakers on that were Peggy Flanagan, Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, and Patina Parks, who's on the governor's staff, as well as Melanie Benjamin, Chief Executive and Chairwoman of the Mille Band of Ojibwe. And I probably mispronounced that some way. The part three, tribes and states working together for AIAN children, speakers were Elizabeth Gruginski, Giovanna Archuleta, Kristen Baszler, and Chris O'Grady. And they represented the states of New Mexico, Oregon, and North Dakota, and how they were working with tribes to solve problems and meet the needs of our Native children. So this finally is number 4 in our series. And the title of it is Righting a Wrong, Advancing Equity and Childcare Funding for AIAN Families. Today, we're going to be showing a video that we will be revealing for the first time, a documentary that was actually done on the Flathead Reservation, home of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. This is the final in the 4-part series, as I said, and we're going to look at this from the perspective of people who work in a child care center, families, parents, and the staff. And so you'll get an in-depth on-site look at tribal child care. So before we do that, I want to remind everyone that we can that you can submit questions using the live chat on YouTube or Twitter using the hashtag BPC Live. So I encourage you to submit questions as we go through this. So we're going to turn now to the two Montana senators who were kind enough to do an intro to the video for us. So first, we'll hear from Senator Daines and then from Senator Jon Tester. So we'll go ahead and run those videos now.
Senator Steve Daines here. And as a member of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, I'm glad to see the work being done to ensure that Montana tribes have the tools and support they need in order to thrive, including access to child care. Having access to child care is critical, not only for families and children, but for the whole community. And thank you to the Early Childhood Initiative at the Bipartisan Policy Center for helping shed light on the importance of accessible child care to help give Native children the resources they need to have a brighter future. Keep up the good work.
This is Senator Jon Tester, and I want to thank you for letting me share a few words with you today as we celebrate the debut of Early Childhood Initiative's film project in partnership with Salish Kootenai College Tribal Child Care Center. Any parent in the room will tell you that the cost of child care is too darn high. That's true across the board, but it's especially true for Native parents who are disproportionately impacted by the lack of affordable child care in rural communities and across Indian country. Most parents don't have the time or money to drive hours to the nearest child care center, and they shouldn't have to. And that's why the Salish Kootenai Tribal College Child Care Center is so important for SKC students and the surrounding community. It's a godsend to working parents and to their kids who are getting quality, culturally competent care right in their backyards. I'll continue to be a strong advocate for child care and Development Block Grant Act and Montana's top-notch tribal colleges and universities, so the tribes have the support they need to open and sustain centers just like this one. Thank you for all the work that you do at the Early Childhood Initiative to support and highlight Montana programs like the SKC Tribal Child Care Center. And please know that my door is always open.
Well, we want to thank the senators for their support of this project and for their support of our tribal communities. So for this video, we went to the Flathead Reservation, home of the Confederated Salish Kootenai and Pend Oreille tribes in northwestern Montana. And I should say my home as well. So it gives me a great deal of pleasure to share with you this film that we made at the Salish Kootenai College Early Learning Center in Pablo, Montana. So we'll go ahead and look at the video, and then we will have a discussion of what we learned from this experience when we're finished. So we'll go ahead and run the video now.
Having this childcare available to me is a blessing. Without it, I wouldn't be able to pursue my degree. And finding childcare right now in this area is next to impossible.
Having access to childcare, being so far away from home, from my own tribal community, has just been such a burden lifted from my shoulders. Actually, had quite a struggle since I returned to school back in 2020.
We have an opportunity to serve the families of the students at Salish Kootenai College, and we're right on campus. Families have an opportunity to come and be a part of our program. They bring their children, and we have an open door policy so they can come in, participate in the classroom, and in between on their breaks. We are a really high quality program, and I want to brag about that. We have really worked to create a wonderful program here.
I know that for most of our parents, having us here means everything to them, because without having quality childcare, and right here on campus, most of our parents live in student housing, which is just right across the fence. Many of our students come from really far away, and they come not knowing anyone, not having a support system. They've left that behind, not having transportation. And so for us to be here on campus, they can walk their children over, they can be in class in 10 minutes, they can call over and ask if their children are, how they're doing. They can be here in a minute's notice if they need to. Having us here for them is everything, because without having childcare, we know that nothing really can happen. You can't go to school, you can't go to work, you can't have all those opportunities to better yourselves. And it's been, over the years, watching our parents be able to leave their communities, wherever they've come from, come here, take that chance to go to school and better themselves, and know that they can leave their children here with us, and they're cared for and they're loved, and it means everything.
It's been a journey. We're a work in progress. So originally the SKC Early Learning Center was called the SKC Child Care, or the Daycare Center. And I worked really intentionally to change the verbiage around that, because we were changing from that old standard of daycare. And we're actually, this is a learning center, and we're recruiting and wanting to hire teachers.
Childcare has always been a tremendous need, that's unmet need. So having just general child care for our working population of employees, whether they're working for tribal functions, government programs, tribal government programs, or they're working in the private sectors here on the reservation, it's been very difficult for them to be able to secure child care so that they can work. It's been a critical unmet need. So, when it does become available, typically it's not available to the full duration of when it's needed. So it may be sporadic through the Head Start program or other like the college daycare or child care center, and it's seasonal, so it's not year round. So the extended hours of child care, having it available year round and even 7 days a week has been a critical missing element for so many of our members and the community at large. It's just hard to come by.
There, coming from us being tribal members, native backgrounds from our reservations, reaching this point in life to actually pursuing a college education has been a struggle for me on my reservation. A lot of my people struggle with suicide, drugs, alcohol, and we come from broken families, and to make it to this point has been a struggle. Now, finding childcare should not be a struggle when you reach this point. Having to worry about, do I need to stay home and take care of my kids, or can I go to school? What can I do? Finding funding, that shouldn't be a struggle. For Native Americans, when we reach this point in life, there should be no struggles. We've already been through enough struggle growing up on reservations. We've already been through enough trials and tribulations, and we're trying to break the cycle.
Being able to provide care for our parents at either a much lower cost or for free, because we have a lot of parents that just, that's a huge hurdle, and the paperwork is immense. Having to go through, we have parents that only enroll their children 1 day a week because the paperwork is just, it's overwhelming. And we provide help with that. We always say, we come in, we'll sit down with you, we'll fill out this paperwork. The quality care, the amount of quality care in, I think, the nation really, but especially here in our community, it's lacking. We opened our infant program this year, and that's been everything, because we've had parents that will call and say, I have a 7-year-old, I have a 3-year-old, and I have a baby, and we could maybe take the 3-year-old, maybe our after-school program, we could take the 7-year-old, but we weren't able to provide care for babies, and we're able to do that now, and that's pretty incredible.
The need for an infant program in this area is very important. There is very few quality infant programs available. Obviously, the ratio in infants is a lot lower than other age groups, and the availability is just not, it's not here in the Valley. We have Head Starts, early Head Starts, and then pretty much just home cares. So we have a lot, I get so many calls for infant and toddler care every year that I have to turn away because we don't have space. So grants came available, and we started dreaming a couple of years ago, and now we have an infant program, and it's lovely.
The funding communities, I mean, it's huge to have that daycare, to have childcare, it's huge. And to put money into that is putting money into the future of sovereignty for the nationwide, because that's where it starts. It starts with the children. It starts with the parents. If that child is brought up in a high quality care, and that seed's planted and those parents feel safe, how much stress that takes off.
One of the things that I learned in the course of all of this was that American Indian children were disproportionately represented in special education programs in both preschool and kindergarten, 1st to 3rd grade. And when I started asking questions about why that was, almost exclusively it had to do with language acquisition, and it really had to do with not having a broad enough vocabulary, and so children would get identified in special education when really they didn't have learning disabilities, they just needed a larger vocabulary. So it's critical that we have places for young ones to go and learn and develop and have high quality opportunities at a very young age.
We continue to work on culture and language within the Early Learning Center, and it's always a work in progress to make it an intentional practice and really embed it into our curriculum. Through other funding, we're also working with the Native Language Teacher Education Program here on campus. We have a SLED program and a CALS, which are Culture and Language Studies, and the Salish Language Educator Development. So there's all of a sudden a lot of blossoming going on even within SKC that will feed into hopefully supporting our teachers digging deeper into language and culture.
Incorporating language. So Rolanda is a Salish speaker, and I've also taken Salish classes as well. The storytelling, just the kind of books you choose, the things you put out in the environment. And then culture is really everything from like clothing to food, and walking around the campus and pointing out the sculptures from the artists on campus.
With toddlers, our curriculum that we use is really open-ended. It's almost all child-led. So it really depends on a teacher and their ability to observe and make assessments and where your children, where their developmental goals are and where they're heading, and kind of create a curriculum around that. So for the toddlers, we do a lot of hands-on, outside, place-based learning. So we'll take them around campus and look at what's going on in nature, in the weather. We pull as much natural materials into our classroom as possible. And toddlers learn through their senses. That's how they absorb what's going on around them. So if we get our hands messy, if we're out in the rain, we have rain suits, so we go out and play in the water. We just immerse ourselves in nature as much as possible.
Our curriculum is kind of a hybrid curriculum, and I come from a variety of programs and where I've experienced a variety of things. So I felt it was really important to take the best of the curriculums I could find and implement them in the classroom. We use a little bit of Montessori, a little bit of mostly Reggio, because it really does go towards the interests of the children and letting the children explore and grow at their own pace with things that they are very excited to learn about. We use a Haggerty program for, we started that last year for phonics, and just as an introduction to put back into the classroom some nursery rhymes. I feel like nursery rhymes kind of disappeared for a while, and yet they're so important for rhyming and helping children to learn, and it supports reading. So we do that, and we have a little bit of high scope still in our program, especially things like plan, do, and review, and word links, letter links are in our program as well. So, but I really felt like as we have evolved, we needed to stay up with what is the best curriculums out there. So.
We're empowering the cultural knowledges that's needed at the earliest age possible, and supporting that to the greatest extent we can, because it's language and sense of place, that pride that people need to know. They need to be proud that they're Native American, and they need to have that ability to touch base with their roots and know their community better. And that starts out right at the beginning. What's a common element for so many people is that gathering of either childcare, any form of that support service, whether in education or that support service for the youth from day one on. So being able to provide that uniqueness that is not necessarily there out in other communities. It's unique to Indian reservations and Native needs, and it can't be overemphasized because it's been suppressed for so long. It's been suppressed and suppressed. You know, don't learn your language. You know, be penalized for knowing your language. You know, not introducing any Native history, sense of place, stories of the landscape. You learn about how to live in your area by those stories that are coming from your family through generations, and knowing what happens in this particular area. That's life history. That's knowing how to live in balance with your community, your environment, and it's done well for Native communities for tens of thousands of years. And why would you want to reinstate that?
Understanding also that early childhood is a really important part of a community and how we strive to get better into the future.
Being with the SKC Learning Center for almost 6 years, they done a lot for me to pursue my education, and without them I probably wouldn't be as far as I am in my education, especially at SKC. I probably would have gave up in 2019 and just never continued on. I probably would have just stopped where I was and just gave up. But having childcare for my oldest daughter and having a good childcare center, and I'm able to trust them, I was able to continue on. And now that I have another daughter and she's in their childcare, I just feel like really thankful for the Learning Center and how much they do with your children, and they build the connections and relationships that you wish every child care center can do with your kid.
I have a 2-year-old, her name's Harley. She goes to the Early Learning Center and she's blossomed so much since she started. She's a little social butterfly now and she enjoys going. Her speech has started developing a lot faster than it was before childcare. It's given me the freedom to come back to school and study and focus on school and not have to worry about my child.
We drive an hour and a half from Whitefish. Believe it or not, when we moved out here, that was the only place, it was actually outside of town several miles, it's the only place that had anything available that was somewhat affordable for housing, for rent. And I haven't been able to get a place in SKC housing on campus, so that's we have to drive. And the reason why the kids aren't in daycare or preschool up there is because they have one preschool that has limited space, and they charge $2,000 a month per kid. I think that'd be 20 times as much as what my tuition and books and fees are down here. Oh, so we wouldn't be able to afford that. I wouldn't be in school because the way things are going with the economy and inflation. Just being able to have the childcare here on campus has just enabled us to continue to work to survive. I mean, because that's basically all of us, any of us are doing. So, I am so grateful for the Early Learning Center and for everything that it's they've helped my children with.
We need people, and they have to have these high standards to be, and we should have high standards for our children, but takes a long time to get through school, a lot of money, a lot of resources. And then when I go through 4 years of school and I could go to Walmart and make almost the same and do a lot less, it's like, why should I go to school? Well, it's because I'm passionate, but I like this. But it is sad that 4 years of education and all this expertise, but I could literally walk out of here and go to Walmart and McDonald's, be less stressed out, and make close to the same. That's not really okay. More high quality people so we can have more high quality kids, because we could double the numbers in here if we could get a little bit more staff. I think that's the biggest thing.
And having it be affordable is such a critical thing for so many people. If you're paying for childcare and you're working at a lower income level, can you afford childcare? Can you get it, and can you pay for it? Equity in pay in relationship to other professional services is critical. In our particular area, we were talking earlier about the need for just simple housing. How can you even recruit teachers if you don't have affordable housing for them? It's impossible. It's a very difficult thing to do. You know, you have to be able to provide for yourself. Equity pay for professional teachers is one that I would say is really interesting need, priority need across every school in the school district. And so the need for subsidies for that, the need for funding for whether it's private, child care providers or institutional ones. It's just having that funded at a national level, or having that supplemented by whatever it might be. If it's nonprofit support, federal support, state or other local support, travel support, it's been a great need, and it has been an unmet need.
Well, I hope that everyone enjoyed the video, got a lot out of it. We certainly learned a lot during the visit and thought it was a very important film to make, especially looking at some of the issues around the need for childcare in our tribal communities and in rural parts especially. So what we're going to do next is welcome into the conversation two people that were there for the filming and also had a lot of input into sort of the scripting of this. First was Barb Faber, who is the chairman or CEO and a founder of Indigenous Visioning, and a longtime friend, a former CCDF administrator herself on her own reservation in Minnesota, and someone who has the national perspective right now in terms of what's happening with the tribes. And also Leanne Corville, who is the co-chair of the early learning department at the Salish Kootenai College and is responsible for a lot of what you saw. And then we're going to have Chairman McDonald. He was so articulate on the film and in person when we talked with him about the understanding the need for childcare on the reservation. So we were sad to find out that he had an emergency and he couldn't join us this afternoon. So that said, I'm going to start by bringing Barb and Leanne into this conversation. I think the first question I want to pose to the two of you is, you saw the data, the childcare gap on the reservation, 46.5%. That's very high for any place in the country. Did that number surprise you? And sort of what could be done to increase the capacity of the SKC Learning Center or create more facilities to serve the community? I'm going to start, Leanne, with you on this one. Did that number surprise you?
Well, when I first saw, the visual of that number, I was like, wow. But as I think about across our reservation, we currently at the Early Learning Center, we're staffed at half. So we could have more toddlers, more preschoolers, and like the teacher said, if we had more staffing, we would have a full center. And that is not unique to us. I know that our local Head Start, early Head Start programs are also struggling with staffing. And I know that that's in many other places. So we have the families, and there's such a need for it. Right now in our Valley, hiring and recruiting quality teachers is just been really challenging. Part of it is an equity in pay. So if you're asking for, particularly at our center, because it's a lab school, we ask for degrees in teachers for our leads and our support staff. But it's really challenging to recruit them for the pay that we have, the equity in pay. And we've slowly been trying to increase that. And so I think that right now is really one of our biggest challenges and we want high quality trained teachers to work with our youngest and most vulnerable, right? Because we know that foundation is being set at this time, and we want those children to be in high quality places. So that's really one of our biggest burdens right now, or hurdles in this area. And I know in many areas is hiring and recruiting. Funding is an issue. We were able to add, we use a lot of grant funding at the SKC Early Learning Center to supplement improvements in our outdoor and indoor environment, training opportunities, curriculum. And we were able to just recently add the infant program, a dream. It was a couple years coming, and we were able to get funding through our different partners, through Kellogg and EEIC in our partnership, to start piecing, more of those quality parts together. But those are the hiring and recruiting right now, particularly for us, is one of the biggest challenges. And for our families, the cost of childcare is really, really difficult. And so we have, uniquely on the reservation, we have some families that use tribal childcare block grant and some that use the state. And with recent changes in post-COVID, families that maybe had a very minimal copay, for example, in the state, in January now are seeing, hundreds of dollars increase. And so it is a really significant another challenge for our families. And also, even as the parents and some of the staff talked about, some of the families will choose to just use limited care. They can't afford to go full time. And so supporting families and subsidizing more, or figuring out a way to create a free care or something along those lines, I think would make all the difference.
Barb, let me ask you this, because you work with programs across the country with many tribes. Is this typical, atypical? What are you seeing as you work with other tribal communities on the unmet need or the gap in the capacity issue?
Bonjour. Yeah, sadly, that is the case. Pretty much across the country, tribes are struggling, and although they receive the CCDBG funding, it's still not enough. And you've seen that firsthand when we visited the Flathead Reservation. What SKC has is very unique, and it is a beautiful, beautiful program. But you were there, Linda. We got to hear from parents. They did not know what they would do if it wasn't for this center. Every community in the country needs childcare. And when childcare isn't there, you know, they do have to drive. And you heard from one of the parents, sometimes an hour and a half one way. And that sadly is not uncommon. You know, I've been, like you, been around childcare for many, many years. And lots of good things have happened over the years. The reauthorization happened, but it's still not enough, especially for infant and toddler care. There are so many families struggling out there. Then you had the COVID situation, and then you have the workforce issue. And then you have parents paying more for childcare than almost their mortgage, especially if they have 2 children. So we're in a critical situation here on a national level, and we need to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. I was surprised when I heard the parent talk about I being from that area, and Leanne, I think you know this too. The drive from Whitefish to Pablo is not an easy drive, and especially on Montana roads in the winter. I just was dumbfounded by the fact that we have families traveling that far for childcare up there. And it made me think about all that was in between, you know, Whitefish and Pablo, for example. You have a lot of parts of the reservation, like many reservations in this country, where you've got small communities of families that don't have access to anything. I'm curious as to what you think the solution is in terms of trying to find more childcare for some of these remote or these small communities where there's just nothing right now. And I'd ask both of you to think about that. I think Barb in particular, I remember a visit with you to a family childcare home on White Earth Reservation. And can we do more in terms of, you know, trying to find solutions for these families closer?
Well, it's a struggle, and yes, living in a rural community, and most of the tribal communities are rural. There are a few urban, very few, but there are some urban. And when you live in rural United States, you know, that alone is a challenge, but to find high quality childcare, and we know that research tells us that the first 5 years are critical, especially the first 3 years. And what childcare does just for the child, but also provides, you know, that child as provides them with the social emotional, the skill building, you know, that stays with them for their lifetime, and they become lifelong learners. So you know, just knowing that when I was a CCDF director for my tribe, that was our goal, is to provide childcare in every one of our villages. And, you know, it sounds easy enough, but you need to make it so people want to be into that business, because it's a hard business. Yes. It's a rewarding business, and you're helping, you know, children in your community. But when, you know, when parents don't have it, they either cannot work, employers don't have employees because there's no childcare. And if it's not high quality childcare, you know, we're also setting them up to fail. Mm-hmm. And we just need to figure this out, Linda. And I know you and I have had hundreds of hours of conversation on this. And I met with a former Office of Child Care administrator and a few years back, and they too are, you know, they try to provide as much funding out there as possible, but it's something bigger than that even. I think we need to really come together as a country and figure this out, because yes, it's a national issue, it's a state issue, it's a tribal issue. But we're at a critical stage here.
Leanne, what are your thoughts? Because, on the Flathead, there are a number of pockets of smaller communities that get really have not much of anything.
Yeah, when one of the things that on our reservation, which spans, like approximately 70 miles ish, north and south, and 60 to 70 east to west. And some of those outlying communities on those edges are very rural, and they don't have access to childcare in some of those centers. And then some of our communities, there's a lot of desert, so there might be one or there might be a few. And I recently talked to our tribal DHRD gal over across the highway, and she said right now she knows of one center on her list, or family provider, that has openings, and her list is about 24-ish, and that she knew of, that had updated her, and that's pretty significant. We looking at across other tribal communities too. I know that we're not unique. Working with some of our other partners, we've discovered, and this is true for the Early Learning Center, but finding liability insurance has been increasingly more difficult if you are in the business. Also, the background checks have been, for I guess a variety of reasons, have taken much longer, which there was a little bit of a change. And so you can't bring that person into your building or your facility until that background check is back, which if it's taking a month to a month and a half, you may have lost, that new employee who can't wait if you're not able to help them during that time. So those have been some really big challenges here at SKC, but also I know in our other tribal communities, the recruitment part, of course, and I think, providing the support and training for people that want to do the work. The state of Montana is quite large, and so we have childcare resource and referrals in different regions. But again, tribal communities have some very rural sections that might be hours to access training, or there's technology challenges within, accessing some of that. So fortunately, funding, is another huge part too, is just being able to access funding to do the things to open and improve. It's really, really critical.
Leanne, we were there. We heard a number of parents, and I'd be curious as to your thoughts on this. We heard a number of parents talk about the application process and how difficult it was for them. And we heard people, like almost not willing to go through that. And I think some of that, if I understood it correctly, was sort of a combination of some of the state versus the tribal applications. What can be done from your view that could help, fix this system so it isn't so cumbersome for parents?
I think streamlining that system to be more parent friendly for all the parents, so that there are not numerous hurdles for them to jump. It's really intimidating for some of our families. We have on SKC campus, we have many different tribes represented and many different communities, as you saw in the video, that come from all over. And so some of them will move here and live here, and some maybe travel back and forth. And so I think just understanding what they need for that paperwork, it seems more difficult, actually. We've always had, I feel like our numbers of parents accessing that, it feels like it's decreased, or parents that are eligible for that support. So I think streamlining that process and making it user-friendly is really, really critical.
I think that, I do think that there are things that can be done. I want to go back, Barb, to you a little bit on this issue in terms of the funding issue. I think we need for our audience to understand that tribal funding actually for childcare is a flat percentage rate of the bigger CCDBG. And that if more tribes apply to be grantees, then the pot gets spread thinner. And we've had a lot of conversations about what can we do to change the formula, if you will, so that it's really based on the numbers of children and the need rather than a flat percentage, no matter how many tribes are in the program. And I don't know, Barb, if you've had any more thoughts about that, or Leanne, but I do think we need to rethink this formula and how we get the money for the families.
I think you're right, Linda. Tribes are already struggling out there, and we need to level the playing field for tribes and increase the tribal set aside across not only childcare, but just about every federal funding. And I believe that if tribes are fully funded for childcare, they would absolutely have adequate childcare out there, because then they'd be able to pay their staff a living wage, basically. And, you know, we always push our children and tell people to go and get their degrees. And like Leanne said, one of her teachers said, you could go to Walmart and make just as much. And so we have to put the money where it matters the most, and that is for safe places for our children while they're young. And I really believe that not only on reservation, but off reservation as well. We have a huge population in urban communities that they don't have the resources. And even though on reservation, you may have a few more resources, in the urban communities is just as bad. Minneapolis metro, St. Paul metro area, for example, 3.69 million people in that area. And I know of only about maybe 4 or 5 Native American childcare sites in that whole urban community. And so they're struggling as well. And I think that we need to have more resources and efforts to work together to get the federal, the tribal, the state people together to try to figure this out. Because like one of the parents said, they struggle just to get to that point of going to get their degree. And now childcare may stop them from getting that degree. And that's just not right. So we need to do something. We need to prioritize our children. We need to prioritize childcare, our workforce, and make it accessible. I know when I was a childcare administrator in our centers, and it's an hour to get from one side to the other. And we had many parents that were traveling an hour to bring their children. And in the middle of winter and in the evening, in the odd hour care, it was a very scary thing for them every day to have to go to work. And so, you know, when we're talking about making, you know, our priorities with children, I think we need to start with childcare and childcare funding and additional funding, increased funding for tribal.
One of the things that we talked when we were there with the chairman about, and I think it's true, and I'd be curious, Leanne, your thinking on this after those conversations. Somewhere we know there's varying estimates about how many of our Native American families live off tribal lands. It goes anywhere from 50 or 60% all the way up to 80%. And how do we reach those families? I think that's one thing that a lot of people are concerned about, but what are your thoughts on that? The chairman, I'm sorry he couldn't be with us because he was very articulate on this.
Yeah. That's a challenging issue because there are I think so many limitations to certain fundings that happen specific to the reservation or off reservation. And I don't think there's an easy answer for that, but there's certainly, I know, looking at our website too, there's a fair number of our membership that lives off the reservation, and have, I think in Missoula, there's the Urban Indian Center. There is some Head Start, early Head Start, but specific to tribally, I don't know that number. I think it would take some creative collaboration, but it would be worth it, and some funding. The funding sources, I think, are challenging. They're so limited, and Barb kind of talked about that too, is that there's just a need for more in general. I know that the more families could be served and have less of a copay, because when you start looking at gas, if you're living rurally, to go from college to home, the one parent driving an hour and a half. Also, the cost of living and housing within our reservation in our county has just skyrocketed. And so to be able to afford, for one, to find a rental or afford, many are not probably even looking at home ownership, because it's the amount to get a home or to find a place to live is really limiting, even for people that have been here for a very long time. So those costs are not reflected in the supports that are coming for children and families and for reservation tribal people.
One of the things that in our first webinar with Senator Dorgan and Anton Truer, we talked about a lot of our families, when they get into urban areas, become invisible. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really something that we need to spend some time thinking about. How do we reach these families who are in these big urban metropolitan centers and are become just invisible to everyone? I think it's a real problem. I do need to get us to, we have several questions here, and I want to get to a couple of the audience questions. I think one, this is pretty interesting, actually. Somebody asked, and it's a hard one, I guess we may not know, but what do the parents who live in remote areas of the reservation who don't have access to care, what are they doing? And I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on that, but yeah, that's a really good question. What do they do? Are they just like the one mother said, just not going to school, or what are they doing?
I know that we have families that call before they decide to come to college, that are looking for, like they said, like an infant spot, a preschooler, maybe a kindergartner. And so when they start thinking about that move or starting that path to better themselves, that is one of the things. Sometimes they choose not to come if they're not able to find that, or that is a question that we sometimes wonder too, is where are all those children that we're not able to serve? I think they're with families or friends, right? Mm-hmm. If the parents are out working, parents come up with, ways of trying to get a little extra support. But that is a concern, is where are those children at? It really limits those families' opportunities.
Leanne, we have another question here that I think is specific to you. It asks about how you use the Early Learning Center as a lab school for your early education students. We didn't ask that question. I assume you are doing that.
We are, yeah. So we recently added, like I said, the infant program. So we have the infant and the toddler and the preschool classroom. We use that as a lab site. So our students in early childhood and even some of our other programs will go do observations over there, mm-hmm. Attend some of our parent socials. We actually recruit some of those ladies that you saw in the video are graduates of SKC, and have chosen, to come back to that place. So we utilize that for students to have access. We were through funding, we were able to get curriculum training on Reggio, and bring that more deeply into the program, and share it, just as opportunity in the early childhood division. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was pretty impressive, I think, in terms of, you having a pipeline of teachers coming into the programs. That's pretty impressive. Actually, a lot of communities don't have that, no matter where you are.
Yeah.
Someone asked a question about, could you say more about family childcare in this context? And are there issues around cost, quality, accessibility, especially in rural areas? Might ask Barb for you to take that one first, because you've done some work in getting family childcare out there.
Sure. I think what worked for us, and we were kind of unique in Minnesota, where we are the largest tribe in Minnesota, and we were able to secure, let me see, probably about 20 family childcare and centers. And why that was successful, I believe, is because of course, the two staff that I charged with making that happen is the on-staff tribal licensor and on-staff early childhood trainer. And that was their job, is just dedicated to recruitment, training, support, and in creating a network. And I think that really helped. And of course, we did that with the CCDBG funding, but it still wasn't enough. And, we were probably the first phone call after a mother found out she was expecting a child. And I say that not kiddingly, because that was true. We were the first phone call for them to get onto our already long waiting list. So infant and toddler care is huge, and we've seen that in Montana. I see it just about in every tribe I go to. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of work and funding.
We have a couple questions here, and I think I wish I had an answer to them. A couple people have asked us, can't we expand the subsidies, or how do we expand the subsidies? And I think that really is an issue of just available funding, and hopefully, some of the work we're doing right now, here in Washington can help us get that money. But I do think it's simply a lack of funds, like it is everywhere in this country. I think that goes without saying. So I'm looking at the clock, and we're getting close here. I want to give both of you my favorite one last question. I mean, just what would you say to a member of Congress if he were sitting here right now listening to this? What do they need to know about tribal childcare? And let's start with you, Barb.
I would say to increase CCDBG and increase the tribal set aside for that. And tribes know their communities, and they need that block grant to help try to solve some of the childcare crisis. And what they're getting now is definitely not enough.
And Leanne, how about you? What would you say?
I would definitely say that the funding for families to access care is just absolutely essential to increase that funding for childcare co-pays. The other part of it, though, there's a two-part issue for equity and wages for our early childhood workforce. And we know that COVID really impacted that even more in an industry that was already hurting, and getting those wages up to parity for livable wages for high quality teaching staff is really critical, because the challenge of finding and recruiting those teachers is another part of that balance, and we need that to be addressed as well.
Well, we're out of time, and I just want to thank both of our panelists, Leanne and Barb, for their time and effort, and all that effort they put into the making of the film. We really appreciate it. And Leanne, please thank Janet Jolly and the staff one more time for all that they did to support this work. We really appreciated it. And all the parents who participated, they were so giving of their time and their special circumstances. Finally, I want to just thank Caroline Osborne and Olivia Rotolo, who on our staff have been behind the scenes making this happen. And a special shout out to Paris Bread and his team that came to the Salish Kootenai College to do the filming for us. We really appreciated all the hard work that people have put into this, and hope that somebody gets something out of this, that it's very, very important for this country to give more thought and actually attention to the needs of our Native American families. They are out there, they are trying their hardest in programs like the Salish Kootenai College to get education, to get a degree, as the one father said, to better themselves. We need to give them the support that it takes to do that. So with that, we're going to close out this series, and again, thank everyone who helped us along the way present this to the American public. So thank you, everyone.